ever had that voice to say, who do you think you are? Why do you believe that? Get real. Do you really think you can achieve that? Today, I'm going to be talking about silencing the chatter, that inner critic that once you decide to make a change in your life, it rises up to tell you why it's not possible. Hello, I'm Cledra, and my passion is to help women of faith step into the bigger things that God has for them by, first of all, being the healthiest version of you. And today we're talking about the chatter, that inner critic, that voice that rises up on the inside. The moment you say, I'm not going to have sugar, that voice reminds you of all the times you tried this in the past and failed. The moment you decide, this is the year I'm going to write my book, that voice tells you, yeah, right. You haven't written it up until this point. So today I'm going to be helping you to manage the inner critic, that chatter that we all get on the path to achieving our goals and ultimately doing what God has for us. So step one is recognizing, and I always make a board for you guys, who told you that first? Who told you that first? I want you to stop and think. And I love to use weight loss in my example so that you can relate to it. I can remember growing up as an overweight child, and during the time that I grew up, you used to have to take physical education, PE, and every year there was the President's Fitness Test where you had to get your weight and go through these different exercises, and the weight was in the middle. You were weighed in front of everyone in your classroom. And I remember to this day, I was 5'10". I'm 5'10" now, and I was 5'10" very early in life. I was 5'10" in middle school, so you can imagine that was really, really tall. And so I remember stepping on the scale, and this was back in the day when they had those scales that clunk, clunk, clunk. And I remember stepping on the scale, and he moved the little large bar from the 50-pound to the 100-pound, and then the little and I weighed 135 pounds. Now you may be saying, Cledra, 135 pounds, you were 5'10", but again, I was 11 years old. And everyone else, all the girls, they were like 4'11", under 5 feet, and they weighed under 100 pounds. So I'll never forget. I'm standing there and I weigh 135 pounds, and I'm looking at my principal. His name was Mr. Allen. I'll never forget him either. And I start crying. I start crying because the boys in the class start surrounding me at this point and start singing the song, Don't Wanna Bump No More with That Big Fat Woman. And I remember that was the first moment that I adopted the belief that I was big. And so I'm giving you that example because I want you to, when you listen to your critic, hopefully you can see this, get the light right. When you listen to your critic, I want you to think about who told you that first. Where was it first introduced into your life? Because we come here so innocently. We come here, without any negative opinions of ourselves. And those negative opinions are usually, we adopt them from other people. And so that incident began a very, very long journey for me of having a great relationship with my body image, my self-image. Ultimately learning that it's all about our God, what God thinks about us, what God says about us in his word, that it has nothing to do with what anyone else says about us, that we are who God says we are. So I don't want you to lose this. So step one, I want you, when you hear that critic in your mind, whatever your critic is saying to you, I want you to think, who told me that first? Number two, who reinforced that? Who reinforced that point? Who reinforced that point? So for me, the people who reinforced it, again, this was years ago, doctors have gotten better. When I would go get my physical, all they talked about was how I should be put on a diet, And they reinforced the point that, okay, something was wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me. 135 pounds and I'm 5'10", nothing was wrong with me at the time. And so for me, it was the medical community that reinforced that point. I think that's a big reason why I'm passionate about helping people like you, because even the supposed gurus or the people, the authority figures we're supposed to believe, they can have some unhealthy practices when it comes to how you make people feel. So I want you to stop and think. Number one was who first told you that, and number two, who reinforced that. Maybe you had siblings who picked on you, or maybe you tried out for something and you didn't get it and it was a big deal in your household. Maybe you had a critical parent, or you maybe had a critical, younger sibling or older sibling. Whatever it is, I want you to stop and think, who reinforced the critic's voice in your mind? Number three, this is the great part. It's time to replace it. It's time to replace it. And so the way that we replace it is first having awareness of it. It's awareness of where it began, awareness of how it's being reinforced, and then now it's taking the action to replace it. And you do that by thinking on purpose, thinking with intention. Now, this is very different than positive thinking. It's being intentional about what you are choosing, keyword, choosing to think about yourself, to think about your abilities, to think about what's possible. And we know that with God, all things are possible. So in this episode, I want you to head over to free resources on my website, Cledra.com, and check out Thinking on Purpose, so that you too can silence the chatter that comes from the inner critic that we all get when we're trying to step into the bigger things that God has for us. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you, and I will see you on the next episode.